I took the drive because it was cheaper than flying and because I needed the time alone. The trip was from northern Arizona to central California, a straight cut through desert highways and empty stretches where gas stations appear without warning and disappear just as fast. I left before dawn to beat traffic and heat. The car was packed light. One suitcase, water, snacks, a paper map folded in the seat pocket. My phone was charged, but I planned not to rely on it. I wanted the drive to be simple. The first few hours felt normal. Pink light over flatland. Long shadows from power poles. The road steady and wide. I kept the radio off. I focused on staying alert. I stopped once for gas and used the restroom. Everything looked fine. Nothing stood out. The change came slowly, which is why it took me time to notice it. Somewhere after crossing into California, I became aware of another car behind me. Dark sedan, older model, nothing distinct. It stayed far enough back to be easy to ignore. I passed a truck and it stayed behind me. I slowed and it slowed. I assumed we were just moving at the same pace. That happens on long drives. After an hour, it was still there. The road bent and straightened. The traffic thinned. The sedan stayed, always at the same distance. Not close enough to feel aggressive. Not far enough to disappear. I checked my mirrors more than usual. I told myself not to read into it. I pulled into a rest area to stretch. The sedan passed without stopping. I watched it go. I waited until it was gone from sight before getting out. I walked around the car. Everything was normal. The sun was higher now. The rest area smelled like dust and hot concrete. I got back on the road. 20 minutes later, the sedan was behind me again. That's when I felt the first real tension. The odds didn't make sense. The rest area only had one exit. The sedan would have had to turn around or wait for me to leave to get back behind me. I tried to reason it out. Maybe it exited and re-entered. Maybe it wasn't the same car. Dark sedans are common. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I slowed. It slowed. I sped up. It stayed back, but matched me. I could feel my shoulders tightening. My mouth felt dry. I decided to stop again, this time at a small gas station off the highway. I turned off without signaling. The station was quiet. One pump working. No other cars. I parked and waited inside the car. The sedan passed the exit without slowing. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. I pulled back onto the highway. The sedan appeared in my mirror within 15 minutes. At that point, fear settled in. Not sharp panic. Something heavier. A sense of being tracked. I started checking every mirror. I noticed small details I hadn't before. The sedan had a cracked right headlight. The hood was slightly lighter than the rest of the car. The windows were tinted darker than legal. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself there were innocent explanations. But my body didn't listen. The road narrowed. Fewer exits. Long stretches without services. The heat rose. The air shimmered above the asphalt. I kept my speed steady. I didn't want to draw attention. Hours passed like that. The sedan never left. It never tried to pass. It never fell back far enough to lose. It was patient. That scared me more than if it had been aggressive. I pulled off at another rest area, larger this time. More cars. Families. Trucks. I parked in clear view and stayed inside. I watched the entrance. The sedan didn't enter. I waited longer than before. My hand shook when I reached for my water. When I got back on the road, I merged behind a cluster of cars. The sedan wasn't visible. Relief washed through me, so hard it made me lightheaded. I stayed with the group as long as I could. Eventually, traffic thinned again. The sedan returned. I started planning without realizing it. I memorized mile markers. I noted exits. I thought about police stations, hospitals, anywhere with people. My phone signal was weak. I kept it ready anyway. As the afternoon wore on, the terrain changed. Hills, curves, trees appearing again. The road became more isolated in a different way. Fewer places to pull off safely. I could feel the pressure building in my chest. The sedan moved closer for the first time. Not tailgating, just closer than before. Enough that I could see the driver's silhouette. No clear features, just a shape. I took the next exit without hesitation. A small road leading into a town I didn't recognize. The sedan followed. That removed my last doubt. The town was barely a town. A few buildings, a closed diner, a motel that looked long abandoned. I drove through without stopping. The sedan stayed behind me. The road led out the other side and narrowed further. Trees closed in. No shoulder. No place to turn around. I felt trapped. I kept driving, scanning for somewhere public, somewhere safe. The road twisted and climbed. My breathing became shallow. I realized I'd been gripping the wheel so hard my fingers hurt. The sedan pulled closer again. I made a decision then. I would not lead it to where I was staying. I would not let it know my destination. I needed to end this on my terms. I saw a sign for a ranger station several miles ahead. Seasonal, likely closed, but was a place on the map. A place meant for authority. I headed toward it. The road turned to gravel. The sedan stayed with me. Dust rose behind both cars. My heart hammered. I focused on keeping control. The ranger station appeared suddenly. A small building. Parking lot empty. Gate open. I pulled in fast and parked near the door. I stayed in the car with the engine running. The sedan slowed at the entrance. It didn't enter. It stopped on the road, idled for a moment. Then it turned around and drove back the way we came. I waited a long time before turning off the engine. The silence felt unreal. My hands were numb. I stayed until another vehicle passed on the road. I left the station and drove to the nearest city without stopping. I stayed in a crowded hotel that night. I parked under lights. I slept badly. The next morning, I checked the car. Nothing tampered with. No damage. No explanation. I never saw the sedan again. I reported the incident to a local non-emergency line. I gave details. Make, color, damage. They took the report. Nothing came of it. I finished the trip by choosing busier routes, even when they took longer. I avoided empty highways. I stopped only where other people were present. I still drive long distances. I still enjoy the road. But I no longer assume solitude means safety. I know now how easy it is to be singled out without ever understanding why. Whatever reason that car followed me, it stopped because I broke the pattern, because I changed the environment, because I made myself harder to isolate. That knowledge is what stays with me, not fear of something unreal, but the clear understanding that some dangers stay just far enough back to look ordinary, waiting for the road to empty before they act. I had been planning the trip for weeks, a simple drive from Portland down to Northern California to visit a friend. Nothing complicated, just hours on the road through forests and mountains, stopping at roadside diners and small towns along the way. I left early in the morning, the sky overcast, the roads slick with overnight rain. My car was packed with a backpack, a small cooler, and enough gas to make it through the stretches where stations were few and far between. I told myself I would take my time, enjoy the drive, and stay alert. The first few hours were ordinary. Highway 101 curved gently along the edge of the forest, tall firs and cedars lining the road, their trunks wet and dark, moss clinging to the bark. The air smelled sharp and clean, with a hint of earth and wet leaves. I kept the radio low, classical music in the background, and focused on the road. The pavement was slick in places, puddles collected in depressions, and I slowed through each curve, careful of the way the tires handled on a wet surface. I passed a few other cars, mostly pickups and delivery vans, each moving slowly around the curves. There was a small pullout where I stopped to stretch and take a drink of water, the cool air filling my lungs, the forest silent except for the occasional rustle of a bird or the distant murmur of a stream. I checked my map, noting the next few towns and potential gas stations. Everything looked normal. As I drove further south, the road narrowed and the forest thickened. The trees pressed close on either side, dark green walls that blocked much of the sky. The pavement had patches of wear, cracks filled with water, and the occasional fallen branch that required careful maneuvering. I noticed the first sign that something was off when I passed a small dirt road marked on the map, but not on my GPS. The road disappeared into the trees, narrow and overgrown, and I thought about taking it just to see where it led. But a feeling in the pit of my stomach told me not to. I stayed on the main highway. Hours passed. The road climbed steadily, winding through hills and over small ridges. The air grew cooler, the clouds darker. Rain started again, light at first, then heavier, streaking across the windshield. I turned on the wipers, keeping a steady rhythm, and slowed through the curves. My eyes scanned constantly for fallen branches, slick patches, anything that could cause a problem. It was one of those drives where every mile feels longer than it should, where the road demands complete attention. That's when I noticed it, a car following me. At first, it was just a dark shape in the rearview mirror, distant and easy to ignore. But it stayed with me, matching my speed exactly, maintaining a consistent distance. I tried to reason it out. Maybe it had been behind me from the start. Maybe it was someone heading to the same town. But the more I drove, the more uneasy I felt. Every time I slowed, it slowed. Every time I sped up, it stayed behind me. I pulled off at the next gas station, a small, dimly lit place with one working pump. The car passed without slowing. Relief washed over me, though it was short-lived. As soon as I re-entered the highway, it appeared again, the headlights steady behind me. I focused on the road, my hands tight on the wheel, my heart rate quickening. The car stayed just far enough back to be noticed, but not close enough to overtake, patient and persistent. The highway narrowed even further as I entered a stretch of forest that seemed older, the trees taller, their roots pushing up the edges of the pavement. I noticed signs of logging, cut stumps, and piles of branches at the roadside, evidence of maintenance that had stopped years ago. The feeling of being watched settled over me, not in the sense of someone seeing me, but the awareness that I was not alone on the road, that someone or something was tracking my every move. I stayed alert, checking the mirrors frequently, noting every curve, every pullout, every potential escape. I reached a small town as night fell. The streets were quiet, the buildings shuttered, a few lights flickering in diners and motels. I drove slowly, staying on a main road, checking every intersection. The car was still behind me, now closer, following at the same distance, its presence inescapable. I thought about calling the police, but my phone had poor reception. I considered stopping in the town, but the streets were empty. I kept moving, driving slowly, deliberately, watching for a place where I could be around other people, somewhere visible and safe. Eventually, I spotted a small truck stop on the outskirts of town. The lights were bright, the parking lot filled with semi-trucks and a few cars. I pulled in quickly, parked near the entrance, and sat in the car for several minutes. The following vehicle did not enter. It idled at the edge of the street for a moment, then turned back onto the highway. I waited until I could see it disappear into the distance before letting myself exhale. Inside the truck stop, the fluorescent lights were harsh, but they made the place feel secure. People moved about, filling orders at the counter, stepping out to smoke, carrying luggage to their cars. I filled my tank, bought coffee, and sat in the corner of the lot, watching. Every few minutes, I checked the highway. The car never returned. For the first time in hours, I felt a measure of relief. The rest of the trip went smoothly. I stayed on well-traveled roads, made frequent stops, and avoided isolated stretches. When I finally arrived at my friend's house, daylight breaking over the hills, I felt exhausted in a way that went beyond fatigue. My body was tense, my nerves raw, and the sense of being followed still lingered in my chest. I parked, unloaded my things, and locked the car carefully, double-checking the doors. I never saw that car again, and I never learned why it had followed me. The memory stayed with me because it was entirely real. It was a simple, ordinary drive that became something I had to navigate with constant awareness, where a single decision, staying on the main road, stopping at the truck stop, made the difference between safety and potential danger. The experience changed the way I approach driving alone. I avoid empty roads at night when I can. I plan routes with visible checkpoints, populated areas, and safe pullouts. I keep my phone charged, my hands on the wheel, and my eyes scanning constantly. I understand now that isolation amplifies ordinary situations into real threats, and that careful attention, planning, and awareness are the only reliable defenses. That road trip ended safely because I stayed alert, chose predictable paths in visible areas, and avoided unnecessary risks. It left me with a deep understanding of how quickly ordinary situations can become threatening, and the memory remains a cautionary reminder of how careful one must be when traveling alone in unfamiliar territory. It was late summer in Washington State, 2016. I was 24. My two friends and I had a long weekend in a truck that could handle dirt roads. We grew up around logging towns. We had spent years driving Forest Service roads, camping where you weren't supposed to, finding places that didn't show up online. We trusted paper maps more than GPS. That mattered to us. It made us feel like we weren't tourists in our own state. We bought beer and ice and threw a cooler in the back. No plan. Just drive until something looked good and turn off the main road. That's how it always went. The map we were using was old. Not antique, just outdated. Folded soft from use. The kind you buy at a gas station that still shows decommissioned spurs and roads that were never meant to last. One line caught our attention. A thin logging road that branched off deeper than most. No name, no notes. It didn't appear on GPS at all. The phone just showed green space. That made it better. We found the turn without trouble. A narrow cut in the trees. No gate. No sign saying no entry. The gravel was darker than usual. Damp, even though it hadn't rained. Ferns leaned in close. Alder branches scraped the sides of the truck. We laughed about pinstripes and took another beer from the cooler once we were a mile in. The air changed fast. It wasn't the normal forest smell. Not clean or wet. It had weight to it. Rot, but not plant rot. Something sour underneath. And metal, like old pennies or blood left too long on concrete. We rolled the windows up without talking about it. The trees grew close together, trunks straight and tall, blocking the sky. Light filtered down in narrow strips. The road narrowed too. Tire ruts deepened, soft at the edges like the ground never fully dried. We passed old logging debris, rusted cables, half-buried drums, stumps cut decades ago, their tops dark and cupped with water. That wasn't strange. Logging leaves scars that last. What bothered me was the quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the truck sounded wrong, like the engine noise was being absorbed instead of echoing back. I remember thinking it felt like driving into insulation. We saw the shapes about 10 minutes in. At first I thought it was just shadows. The way your eyes fill in patterns when you stare too long at trees. Tall forms between trunks. Vertical. Still. Too straight to be branches. Too dark to be shadows. I looked away and then back. They were still there. Not moving. Not stepping out. Just present. Like someone standing with their back pressed to a tree, trying not to be seen. Except there were too many. And they were spaced wrong. Evenly, like they knew where to stand. I told myself it was old equipment. Holes. Cut trunks left upright for some reason I didn't understand. But we kept driving and the shapes stayed with us, appearing and disappearing between trees as the road curved. None of us said anything. That's what scares me the most now. We were all seeing it, and no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. The road dipped. The smell got stronger. The ground turned soft enough that the tires kicked mud. I checked the mirror. The road behind us looked wrong. Narrower than it should have been. The ruts didn't line up with our tires. I told the driver to slow down. He did. We went another 100 yards and then stopped. The silence pressed in. We got out of the truck. The air felt colder outside than it should have. Heavy. My ears rang. I walked a few steps back to look at where we came from. There was no road. Not covered. Not grown over. Gone. Just forest floor. Moss. Ferns. Trees packed tight. No tire tracks. No broken branches. No sign we had driven through it all. It was like someone erased it with care. I felt my stomach drop in a clean, sharp way. We didn't panic right away. We walked the edge where the road should have been, kicking at the ground, pushing past brush. Nothing. Solid forest. Old growth mixed with second growth. No clearing. No cut. No way a truck could have passed through even an hour earlier. I remember noticing how the forest floor looked undisturbed. No snapped twigs. No crushed plants. As if it had been like that for years. That's when the smell came back stronger, like we had stirred it up by stopping. We got back in the truck fast. The driver turned us around in the narrow space, tires sliding. I watched the trees while he did it. The shapes were closer now. Not moving, but nearer. I could see details I hadn't before. Uneven edges. Some thicker than others. Some leaning slightly, like people resting their weight on one leg. We drove forward because there was no backward. The maps still showed the road. The GPS still showed nothing. We followed the ruts because that was all we had. The road twisted more than it should have. Curves too tight for logging trucks. Slopes that felt wrong. Downhill that never leveled out. Then uphill that strained the engine. Hours passed, or it felt like hours. No sense of distance. No sun movement we could track through the canopy. We rationed the beer without talking about it. The cooler water tasted like metal. We passed things that didn't belong. Piles of clothing too decayed to identify. Scraps of blue tarp. A smashed plastic chair half buried in mud. No campsite. No fire ring. No explanation. The shape stayed with us until they didn't. At some point I realized I hadn't seen one in a while. That scared me more than when they were there. The road straightened suddenly. Trees pulled back. Light opened up. The smell lifted like a curtain being pulled away. We came around a bend and hit pavement. Clean asphalt. Yellow lines. A state road we recognized immediately. We rolled onto it without stopping and drove for miles before pulling over. The truck was coated in mud. Thick, gray-brown mud splashed up to the windows. Stuff I didn't recognize. It smelled like rust. We checked the map. The road wasn't there anymore. Not faint. Not crossed out. Gone. The paper showed uninterrupted green where the line had been. We checked later online. Satellite images. Old Forest Service records. Nothing matched. No decommissioned road listed. No logging spur on record in that area. We went back once, months later, during daylight. Same highway. Same turn. There was no road. Just trees. Dense. Untouched. No gap wide enough for a person to walk through, let alone a truck. We stopped exploring after that. Not officially. We just didn't suggest it anymore. I still think about the shapes. I still smell that metal rot sometimes when I'm in the woods, even in places I know well. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in people. I believe in illegal logging, hidden camps, places where you aren't meant to stop or look too closely. And I believe some roads only exist when you're already too far in to turn around. I was driving overnight from El Paso to Austin for a job interview I couldn't afford to miss. I had already rescheduled it once. The pay bump would change everything. I left just after midnight because hotel money felt wasted, and I told myself night driving was easier when the road stayed empty. The desert air was cooler. The highway felt wide and forgiving. I packed light. One suit, a folder with printed resumes, even though no one asked for paper anymore. Fast food napkins shoved into the door pocket. Half a tank of gas and a plan to refill outside Fort Stockton. I record voice notes to stay awake. I've done it for years. I talk through routes, repeat mile markers, say what I'm seeing. It keeps my brain moving. It also gives me something to check later if I feel like I lost time. That mattered to me more than I liked admitting. I get tired in a way that doesn't feel normal. Heavy, sudden, like someone pulled a cord. The road east of El Paso was flat and dark. No lights except my own and the red dots of towers blinking in the distance. AM radio barely worked. My phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark, plugged into the charger. Every few minutes I'd tap it and record another note. The sound of my voice felt solid inside the car. Proof I was still there. Around 1:30 a.m., I pulled into a gas station that looked open but felt closed. Fluorescent lights buzzing. One truck at the pump. No one inside. I topped off the tank and used the restroom. I checked the back seat out of habit. Suit bag flat across the bench. Shoes tucked underneath. Nothing else. I locked the doors and got back on the highway. The stretch between Fort Stockton and Ozona always feels longer than it is. The road bends just enough to keep you guessing. The shoulders narrow. Reflectors flash by like something running beside you. I cracked the window to let cold air in. My eyes burned. I recorded another note. I said the time and the mile marker. I said I felt fine. I said that out loud because it didn't feel true. At some point the feeling started. It wasn't sudden. It grew. A pressure behind my shoulders. The sense that the air inside the car was different from the air outside. Thicker. Used. I checked the mirror. Back seat empty. Headrests lined up the way I left them. I adjusted the rear view anyway. I told myself it was just the road doing what it does at night. I kept driving. I stopped recording for a while. I focused on the white lines and the way the headlights cut a tunnel through the dark. My chest felt tight. My hands were steady but distant, like they belonged to someone else. I rolled the window down more. The wind roared. It helped. At 2:17 a.m. my phone recorded a voice note. I don't remember making it. The next thing I remember clearly is passing a green sign for Sonora. I checked the time and felt a jolt of panic. I didn't know how long I'd been quiet. I slowed down. I pulled onto the shoulder and sat there with the hazards on. I took a breath and another. I checked the back seat again. Empty. I opened the trunk. Empty except for my bag and a spare tire. I checked under the seats. Nothing. I blamed fatigue. I drank warm coffee from a gas station cup and let it burn my tongue. I drove on. I reached Austin just after sunrise. Traffic thickened. The sky went pale. Buildings appeared like something drawn in pencil. I parked at a cheap motel on the edge of town and slept for 3 hours. My phone stayed face down on the nightstand. I didn't look at it. After the interview, which went fine, but not great, I drove to a fast food place and sat in the parking lot eating fries that tasted like cardboard. That's when I opened the voice notes app. I wanted to hear how bad my voice sounded during the night. I wanted proof it was just exhaustion. The list showed a recording at 2:17 a.m. The title was automatic. Date and time. The length was 42 seconds. I almost deleted it without listening. I wish I had. The first few seconds were road noise. Tires. Wind. Then my voice. Low. Slurred. I said I felt like someone was in the back seat. I said it slowly, like I was choosing each word with care. My voice didn't sound scared. It sounded certain. Behind my voice, there was breathing. It was close. Too close for the phone, mic to pick up if it was coming from outside. Slow in and out. Wet like air passing through a mouth that had too much saliva. It didn't match my breath. I know my breathing when I talk. This was separate, delayed, as if someone else was listening to me speak and breathing around the words. I checked the car immediately. Broad daylight. People everywhere. Back seat empty. Trunk empty. I sat there with the doors locked and the windows up, listening again. The breathing was still there. Clearer now that I knew it wasn't me. I deleted the file. I watched it disappear. I emptied the trash inside the app. I told myself there was a simple reason. Phone glitch. Audio artifact. My own breath recorded twice because of noise reduction lag. Something technical I didn't understand. The drive back west the next day felt wrong from the start. The car smelled off. Sour. I checked under the seats again. Nothing. I checked the vents. Clean. I told myself stress makes people notice things that were always there. That night, stopped outside Junction to sleep for a few hours, my phone buzzed. A voice note notification. Recorded at 2:17 a.m. I hadn't recorded anything. The car was off. The keys were on the dashboard. I was awake. I opened the app with shaking hands. The file was back. Same length. Same timestamp. Same title. I listened once more. This time I noticed something I missed before. Near the end, after my voice stopped, the breathing changed. It grew faster, excited. There was a faint rustling sound, like fabric shifting close to the microphone. Then the file cut off. I didn't delete it again. I turned the phone off completely and put it in the glove compartment. I slept with the lights on. I woke every hour. The rest of the drive was a blur of caffeine and fear. I stopped often. I checked the car every time. Nothing changed. Nothing appeared. When I got home, I took the phone to a repair shop. They found no malware, no corruption, no explanation. They said cloud backups can restore deleted files automatically if settings conflict. They said audio can capture strange overlaps at night when the brain is tired. They said breathing can echo. I accepted that explanation because I needed to. I sold the car a month later. Full detail. New filters. No issues found. I bought a different phone. New account. No cloud restore. I still drive long distances for work. I still record voice notes sometimes. But I never do it overnight anymore. And I never listen to anything recorded at 2:17 a.m., even when the app shows a file I know I didn't make. I delete those without opening them. They always come back once. Then they stop. I was driving alone through rural Nevada in July 2020, relocating for work, and the whole move already felt unreal before anything strange happened. I had packed my life into the back of my car, quit a job I'd held for years, and pointed myself east with no real attachment left behind. I left Reno late to avoid the heat, around 10 p.m., figuring the desert would be easier to handle after dark. I topped off the tank, checked my tires, and pulled onto the highway with the windows down for the first few miles, letting the dry air move through the car. Once the city lights faded, the road emptied fast. Nevada does that. One minute there are casinos glowing in the distance, and the next there's nothing but black land and a ribbon of asphalt cutting through it. The stars were sharp and bright, the kind you only see when there's no light pollution. The radio lost its signal not long after I left town, dissolving into static, so I shut it off and drove in silence. The road felt empty in a way that made me aware of my own breathing. No headlights ahead, no taillights behind, just the hum of tires and the steady pull of the engine. The darkness on either side of the road wasn't flat. It had shape to it, low hills and washes and uneven ground that disappeared into shadow. Every now and then a reflective marker would flash past, then vanish again. About 30 miles out, I noticed movement to my right. At first I thought it was a shadow from my headlights catching brush or a slope changing angle. The desert plays tricks like that at night, but the movement stayed consistent. It wasn't random. It was keeping pace with the car. I glanced toward the passenger side, careful not to turn my head too far. Something was running alongside my car, just outside the edge of the headlights. Not behind me, not cutting across the road, running parallel. My first thought was that it was an animal, maybe a large dog or a coyote moving along the shoulder. But the shape was wrong. Too tall, too narrow through the torso. The motion didn't have the bounce animals have. It was smooth, controlled, almost economical, like it knew exactly how fast to move. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and focused on the lane. The road was straight, clear, no reason to slow down. I checked the speedometer. 65, normal highway speed. Whatever was out, there was matching it without effort. I eased the speed up by 5 miles an hour. The thing stayed with me. It didn't fall back. It didn't surge ahead. It adjusted instantly, like it was tethered to the car. Still just outside the headlights, where the light fell off into shadow. I couldn't see details clearly, but I could see enough to know it wasn't on 4 legs. The arms were long, swinging low. The posture was bent forward, head down, spine angled in a way that looked wrong for a person, but also wrong for any animal I knew. My mouth went dry. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Someone running for a prank. Someone on drugs. Someone trying to scare drivers for reasons I didn't want to understand. Nevada has wide spaces and strange people. That's what I told myself. I slowed down. The thing slowed down with me. My heart started to pound hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. I didn't look directly at it anymore. I watched it through my peripheral vision, catching the rhythm of movement, the way it stayed perfectly aligned with my door, never drifting closer, never falling away. 10 seconds passed, then 30, then a full minute. The longer it went on, the worse it felt. If it had charged the car, if it had crossed the road, if it had done anything sudden, I might have reacted. But it didn't. It just stayed there, matching me like this was normal, like this was what it had intended to do all along. I pressed the gas harder. 70, 75. The engine climbed. The road rushed under me faster. The wind noise increased. The thing kept pace without any visible strain. Its arms extended farther back as it ran. Elbows bent at sharp angles, hands low near its knees. The legs moved in long, ground-covering strides. It didn't stumble. It didn't adjust its footing. It ran like it knew the terrain perfectly, even though it was mostly invisible. I thought about swerving left, about changing lanes suddenly, about hitting the brakes. Every option felt wrong. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I didn't want to provoke it. I didn't want to lose control of the car out there, alone at night. Sweat ran down my back despite the cool air. My hands were slick on the wheel. My eyes burned from not blinking enough. I counted mile markers to keep track of time, forcing myself to stay grounded. This went on for nearly 10 minutes. 10 minutes of driving at highway speed with something running beside me, close enough that if it reached out, it might have been able to touch the car. 10 minutes of trying to convince myself I was imagining details, that exhaustion or stress or the long move had finally gotten to me. But I was wide awake. I wasn't drifting. I wasn't tired enough to hallucinate. I'd slept the night before. I hadn't taken anything. There was nothing in my system that could explain it. The road dipped slightly ahead, crossing a dry riverbed. I recognized it because the land opened up briefly, the ground dropping down and then rising again, the shoulders wider, the gravel lighter in color. A shallow concrete bridge carried the road over it. No water, just a wide stretch of pale sand and rock below. As the car rolled down toward the dip, the thing stayed with me right until the edge. The moment I crossed over the riverbed, it stopped. Not slowed, not hesitated. It stopped dead, like it had hit an invisible wall. 1 second it was running beside me. The next it was standing still at the edge of the dry wash, bent forward, arms hanging, head lowered. The headlights caught it fully for the first time as I passed. I didn't see a face clearly. I saw skin stretched tight over bone. I saw limbs too long for the frame. I saw a shape that looked human enough to unsettle me, but wrong enough that I couldn't make sense of it. Then it was behind me, shrinking fast in the mirror, still standing at the edge of the riverbed, not following. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back again. I drove until my legs cramped and my shoulders ached from tension. I didn't stop until I reached a lit rest area nearly an hour later. I parked under the brightest light I could find and sat there with the engine running, shaking, staring at my reflection in the windshield. Nothing else happened that night. The rest of the drive was empty and quiet. The road stayed normal. No more movement, no more shapes in the dark. I arrived at my destination the next afternoon exhausted and wired, like my body hadn't caught up with what my mind had gone through. I unpacked slowly. I slept with the lights on the first night, then told myself that was stupid and forced myself to turn them off the next. I don't tell people this story anymore. I did it first. Friends, co-workers, they laughed. They said it was a runner. They said it was a trick of the light. They said the desert messes with depth perception. Someone suggested it was probably just a reflection from my own car. None of those explanations fit what I saw. I didn't hallucinate. I didn't imagine it. I know how long it stayed with me. I know where it stopped. I later looked at a map and saw that the riverbed marked a boundary between two stretches of land managed by different counties, different jurisdictions, different uses. That detail stuck with me in a way I still can't explain. I still drive through Nevada for work sometimes. I don't leave late anymore. I don't drive with the radio off. And when I cross dry riverbeds at night, I don't look to the sides of the road because I know some things don't need to chase you to reach you. They just need to keep pace until they can't go any farther. This happened in 2015 in northern Michigan, and I still measure time as before and after that drive. I was 28 then. My younger brother was 24, restless, always chasing the next plan that promised a shortcut to something better. He called me early one morning in February and asked if I would drive him upstate to look at a cabin he wanted to buy. He said it was a foreclosure. He said the price was insane. He said it was a chance that wouldn't come again. He wouldn't send me the listing. That should have stopped me. I asked for the address, photos, anything. He said the listing was about to be pulled and that the seller wanted to meet in person. He said he didn't want to put it in writing yet. He sounded excited in a way that felt forced, like he was talking faster than his thoughts. I told myself he was just trying to act confident. He had always been like that. I agreed to drive because I had a truck that handled snow better and because he was my brother. We left before dawn. The sky was flat and gray, the kind of winter light that doesn't feel like morning so much as a delay of night. Snow had fallen earlier in the week, not heavy, but steady enough to coat everything and then harden. The highways were clear, salted down to wet black lines, but the farther north we went, the less traffic there was. Gas stations thinned out. Cell service dipped in and out. He kept giving me directions from memory, not from map. He said he'd been studying the area for weeks. He pointed when to turn, when to stay straight. Each road got narrower than the last. Pavement turned to cracked asphalt, then to gravel, then to something that looked like a road only because it cut a line through the trees. The last turn took us onto a forest road that hadn't been plowed. Snow covered it in an uneven layer, crusted on top, soft underneath. There were no tire tracks ahead of us. None behind us either once we rolled forward. The truck tires broke through the crust with a dull sound. leaving clean grooves that filled slowly as snow slid back in. That bothered me more than it should have. People lived up here. Cabins, hunting camps, snowmobiles. Someone should have been through recently. The snow wasn't fresh. It had fallen days earlier. The air felt cold enough to sting the inside of my nose, but still, no tracks, no footprints along the edges. No sign anyone used this road at all. The forest pressed in tight on both sides. Tall pines and bare birch trunks stood close, branches heavy with snow, bending inward. It felt like the road was being held open rather than naturally there. The light dimmed, even though it was getting later in the morning, the canopy swallowing what little brightness the sky offered. I drove slow. The truck idled loud in the quiet. My brother kept looking out his window, leaning forward slightly like he was trying to see something specific through the trees. He checked his phone more than once, frowning at the screen, then putting it away. About halfway there, he told me to stop the car. I eased to a halt, the truck rocking slightly as it settled into the snow ruts. The engine hummed. Steam lifted from the hood. I asked him why, expecting him to point out a fallen branch or a drift ahead. He said he heard something calling his name from the trees. I didn't hear anything. No voices. No movement. Just wind high up, shifting snow off branches in soft drops. The forest was quiet in that deep winter way, the kind of quiet that feels thick. I told him I didn't hear it. He looked at me like I was missing something obvious. Before I could say anything else, he opened his door. Cold rushed in. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped out. He stood there for a second, head tilted, listening. Then he walked off the road and into the trees, following a narrow gap between trunks like it was already marked out for him. I didn't follow. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, watching his jacket move between branches until it disappeared completely. I waited for him to come back out, laughing, telling me he thought he heard something stupid. I waited for a minute, then 5, then 10. I turned the engine off to save gas. A sudden quiet made my ears ring. I cracked my window and called his name once, loud enough to echo. Nothing answered. I told myself he just needed to check something. Maybe he thought he recognized a landmark. Maybe he was trying to prove something to himself. 15 minutes passed. The cold crept in, even with the heater off only briefly. I turned the engine back on and ran it for a bit, then shut it off again. I checked my phone. No service. I got out of the truck and walked a few steps into the trees where he had gone. The snow off the road was deeper, untouched, smooth except for the single set of footprints leading away. They went straight in for maybe 30 feet, then veered slightly and vanished where the snow looked the same as everywhere else. No broken crust, no compressed trail, just clean white ground. That made my stomach tighten. Footprints don't just stop. I didn't go farther. I didn't want to mess up whatever chance there was of following him if he came back, or if someone else needed to see where he'd gone. I went back to the truck and waited. Time stretched in a way that made it hard to tell how much was really passing. The light shifted, gray turning darker, the forest swallowing more of it. The temperature dropped. The fuel gauge ticked down. I called his phone again and again, even though I knew there was no service. I used the truck's horn once, then twice, the sound flat and wrong in the woods. An hour passed, then more. The sky began to fade toward evening, the kind of early dark that comes fast in winter. I started the truck and drove forward a short distance, then back, headlights sweeping the trees, hoping to catch a flash of movement, a reflection, anything. Nothing moved. I opened both doors and left them open, the interior light glowing weakly like a signal. I stood outside and listened until my ears hurt from the effort. Snow fell from a branch somewhere deeper in, a soft rush that made me jump. When it got fully dark, fear set in hard. Real fear, not worry. I thought about walking out to find help, but I had no idea how far we were from the last paved road. I thought about staying the night in the truck, but the cold was dropping fast, and I didn't know if I could keep the engine running safely for that long. I chose to drive out. I hated myself for it, even as I did it. I told myself I would get help and come back with people, with lights, with equipment. I backed the truck slowly, following my own tracks, headlights shaking through the trees. It felt wrong to leave the road empty behind me. His footprints already gone, the forest closing back in. I reached the main road hours later and found service. I called the police. I drove back as soon as they told me to, following a cruiser that cut through the dark like it belonged there more than I ever had. They searched that night and for days after. Volunteers, dogs, snowmobiles. They found nothing. No tracks beyond the road. No signs of a struggle. No dropped phone. No torn fabric. Nothing that explained where my brother went or how. Spring came late that year. When the snow finally melted, they found my truck again where it had been left during the initial search, pulled deeper in by tow crews and investigators. The doors were still open. The interior smelled stale and damp. There were no footprints around it, no mud prints, no sign anyone had approached it after I left. They searched again once the ground was clear. They found old hunting trails, rusted cans, a collapsed shed farther, and that wasn't on any map. They never found my brother. The official conclusion was exposure, disorientation, misadventure. They said people underestimate the woods. They said sound travels strangely in winter. They said he could have wandered far in a short time. I know what I saw. I know where his footprints ended. I know how the forest felt like it was leaning toward us before he got out. I don't drive forest roads anymore. I don't follow directions I can't verify. And when someone tells me they hear something calling them from the trees, I don't wait to see if it calls them back. There were 4 of us, college friends, driving from Phoenix to San Diego in March 2021 for spring break. The semester had been heavy and uneven because of everything going on that year, and the idea of a cheap motel near the beach felt like relief. No parents, no deadlines for a few days, just driving west and letting the desert fall away behind us. I was driving because I had the newest car, a mid-sized sedan I bought a few months earlier, still smelling faintly of factory plastic and cleaner. We left Phoenix late to avoid traffic a little after 9 at night. The city lights faded fast, replaced by wide dark stretches broken by distant towers and the glow of gas stations. The car was packed tight with bags, towels, a cooler, and clothes rolled instead of folded. The windows were down at first, dry air rushing in, then back up once the night cooled. Everything felt normal. Loud music, tired laughter, the kind of trip that feels easy before anything happens. By the time it was close to midnight, the road had thinned out. Fewer cars, long gaps between headlights. The desert at night feels empty in a way that presses on you. It's not quiet exactly. There's wind and distant engines and the hum of tires. But there's nothing around you that feels close or human. Just dark land stretching past the edge of the headlights. At 11:40 p.m., Google Maps rerouted us. The blue line shifted without warning, and the calm voice announced a faster route. I didn't question it. Traffic delays were common that year, with construction and random closures. I took the exit it told me to. The highway dropped away behind us, replaced by a narrower road that still looked paved at first, though rougher, with cracks that caught the light. Within minutes, the pavement ended. The tires changed sound, from smooth hiss to a low crunch. The headlights lit packed dirt and scattered stones. I slowed down, checking the mirrors, half expecting someone to say something, but no one did. The map showed a thin line cutting across open land, reconnecting with the main road farther west. It still claimed it would save time. The road narrowed as we went. The dirt gave way to something worse, rutted and uneven, with shallow dips that made the suspension creak. Dust lifted behind us and hung in the air, catching the red glow of the taillights. There were no signs, no reflectors, no fences, just scrubland on both sides, low bushes, patches of rock, and darkness beyond the reach of the beams. That was when I noticed the wooden posts. They lined the road at irregular intervals, some upright, some leaning, some snapped off near the base. They weren't uniform like fence posts. They looked old, weather gray, split by sun and time. A few had carvings cut into them, shallow grooves that didn't form clear shapes, just lines and marks that looked deliberate. They flashed by one after another, close to the road, close enough that I instinctively edged toward the center. 10 minutes passed like that, the car bouncing lightly, my hands tied on the wheel. The map no longer showed nearby roads, just a thin line and empty beige around it. No service bars flickered on my phone, though the GPS still worked. Then the headlights caught a shape ahead. At first, I thought it was a signpost that had fallen into the road. Then it resolved into a person standing barefoot in the middle of the track. He wasn't moving. He wasn't turning. He was just there, facing slightly away, arms at his sides. I didn't slow down right away. My foot froze above the brake, my mind trying to decide what made sense. People don't stand barefoot on dirt roads in the desert at night. He wasn't hitchhiking. He wasn't waving. He wasn't reacting to the car at all. As we got closer, I swerved just enough to pass him without hitting him. The headlights washed over his body for a second. He was thin, wearing dark pants, no shirt, skin dusty and pale under the glare. His head was angled down. In the back seat, one of my friends leaned forward without touching me, staring past my shoulder. I heard breathing change behind me. Someone shifted. I didn't look back at the man. The car passed him, and the darkness swallowed him instantly, like he'd never been there at all. The rearview mirror showed empty road and drifting dust. No movement, no figure shrinking into the distance. Just the posts and the dirt. My friend in the back seat said he didn't have a face. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want details. The road ahead felt too narrow, the darkness too close. I focused on keeping the tires out of the deeper ruts and staying between the posts. The map said we were still moving toward the highway. The estimated arrival time crept forward instead of dropping. The reroute that was supposed to save time was now adding it. The blue line curved and stretched, looping wider than it had before. The wooden posts continued, some carved, some broken. A few lay on the ground, half buried, like they'd been pushed over and left. The scrubland thickened in places, bushes brushing the sides of the car with dry scraping sounds. I smelled dust through the vents, dry and sharp. No one spoke, not because we agreed not to, but because there was nothing useful to say. The car felt sealed, like a capsule moving through something we weren't meant to be in. After what felt like too long to still be on a shortcut, the dirt turned rougher. The ruts deepened. Rocks clattered under the chassis. I slowed more, afraid of blowing a tire. The posts thinned out, then stopped altogether, leaving the road completely unmarked. For a moment, I considered turning around. The thought of going back past that spot, of seeing whether the man was still there, locked my arms in place. Going forward felt bad. Going back felt worse. The map kept insisting. Nearly 2 hours after leaving the highway, the dirt smoothed out. The crunch softened. The headlights picked up a pale strip ahead that looked almost reflective. Pavement. When the tires hit it, the sound change felt unreal, like stepping on a solid ground after being on a boat too long. I pulled over onto the shoulder without thinking, just to stop moving. The engine ticked as it cooled. Dust drifted past the headlights. The map recalculated and showed us back on a numbered road, one we recognized. None of us said anything about the dirt road. No one mentioned the posts. No one mentioned the man. We got back on the highway and drove the rest of the way in silence, exhaustion settling in once the tension drained. We reached the motel near San Diego, close to dawn. It was the kind of place with faded paint and thin walls, but it had a parking lot and lights and other cars. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there for a moment longer than necessary. In the morning, sunlight made everything feel smaller and less threatening. The ocean was only a few blocks away. Birds screamed. Cars passed on the street. For a while, the drive felt like something that had happened to different people. Then I walked around the back of the car. Dried mud streaked the trunk, darker than the dust from the road, pressed flat in distinct shapes. Handprints, full palms with fingers spread, some overlapping, some angled, like someone had braced themselves there. They were too high to be accidental splash marks, too defined to be random. The rest of the car was clean. No one had touched the trunk since we left Phoenix. No one had opened it after we packed. The mud was dry and cracked, the edges sharp. We stood there looking at it. No one laughed. No one tried to explain away. Eventually, someone grabbed paper towels from the motel room, and we wiped the marks off with water from bottle. The mud smeared, then disappeared, leaving faint streaks that caught the light until they dried. We went to the beach later that day. We did everything we'd planned. We never talked about the reroute again. We never checked the map history. We never drove at night for the rest of the trip. When I got home, I cleaned the car properly. I checked the undercarriage. I checked the tires. There were scratches underneath and packed dirt in places that suggested we'd driven somewhere worse than a maintained road. I stopped trusting shortcuts after that. I stopped letting apps decide for me late at night. And when I drive through open land now, I keep the windows up, the speed steady, and my eyes on the road because some places don't need fences or signs to keep people out. I went on that drive in late October 2018 because I needed to clear my head. I had just quit my warehouse job in Indiana after a long stretch of night shifts that left my sleep broken and my nerves shot. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't plan a route beyond pointing the car west. Colorado sounded far enough to feel like a reset. I left around 9:30 p.m. with a half tank of gas, a duffel bag in the back seat, and bad music playing too loud because silence felt worse. The first few hours were normal. Indiana bled into Illinois into Missouri. Truck stops, rest areas, empty stretches where the headlights carved tunnels through the dark. I drank gas station coffee that tasted burnt and metallic. My phone GPS stayed clipped to the dash, the blue line steady, the distance ticking down. I remember thinking I'd sleep in the car if I had to. I remember feeling lighter the farther I got from home. Kansas started after midnight. The roads flattened out and the sky felt bigger, like it was pressing down instead of opening up. Wind pushed at the car from the side. I turned the music down because it stopped helping. Out there, the dark wasn't just absence of light. It had weight. The road ahead looked the same mile after mile. Two pale lines and nothing else. I passed mile marker 114 sometime after 12:30 a.m. I noticed it because the reflector was broken, hanging at an angle, catching my headlights wrong. A few seconds later, there was a dead armadillo on the shoulder, half on the gravel, half in the grass. It looked fresh. I remember that because its tail was stiff and straight, not flattened yet. I didn't think anything of it until I passed mile marker 114 again. At first I assumed I'd zoned out. Long drives do that. You miss exits, you miss signs. But the second time, it was the same marker, same broken reflector, same armadillo, same position, same stiff tail. I checked the GPS. The little arrow was moving forward. The distance to Denver had gone down. I was on the right highway. I told myself it was coincidence. Kansas has a lot of roadkill. Reflectors break all the time. The third time happened less than an hour later. By then my chest was tight. I knew how long I'd been driving. I knew I hadn't turned around. There were no exits, no ramps, no curves sharp enough to loop back. The road was straight. The GPS showed me miles ahead of where I'd been. Still, there was again. Mile marker 114. Broken reflector. Dead armadillo. Even the grass around it looked the same, pressed down like something had crawled through it earlier. I slowed down without meaning to. As soon as I did, something moved in the grass beside the road. At first I thought it was a deer keeping pace, but it was wrong. Too tall. The shape stayed upright instead of dropping to all fours. It didn't run ahead or fall behind. It matched my speed exactly, just beyond the reach of the headlights. I couldn't see details, just a dark outline moving through darker grass. When I sped up, it sped up. When I slowed, it stayed there. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I didn't stop. I didn't pull over. I didn't even reach for my phone. I kept my eyes on the road and tried to breathe slow. The thing in the grass stayed with me for maybe 2 miles, then slipped back and vanished like it had never been there. The GPS voice chirped about staying on the highway. The fuel gauge dropped lower than it should have. I told myself the sensor was off. Older cars do that. I told myself a lot of things to avoid the one thought that kept pushing in, which was that I should turn around. I didn't. Turning around felt worse than going forward. I passed mile marker 114 again. This time I didn't slow down. I stared straight ahead and pushed the speed up 5, then 10 miles per hour. The armadillo blurred past. The reflector flashed. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my neck. After that, the row markers stopped making sense. The numbers skipped. I saw 118, then 112, then 119. The GPS kept counting forward, but the estimated arrival time didn't change. It stayed stuck just before sunrise, like I was chasing morning and never catching it. Every time I eased off the gas, something moved in the grass. Not always on the same side. Sometimes left, sometimes right. Always pacing me. Always just out of clear view. I tried flashing my high beams once. The grass lit up, empty. As soon as I went back to low beams, the movement returned. The fuel gauge hit empty around what should have been 4 a.m. The car didn't die. I noticed because the low fuel light came on, then started flickering like it couldn't decide if it was real. The needle rested below the E. I waited for the engine to sputter. It didn't. I kept driving, afraid that acknowledging it would make it stop. My phone battery dropped fast, even though it was plugged in. The GPS screen dimmed and brightened on its own. The time in the corner jumped backward once, then corrected itself. I remember checking the dash clock and seeing it say 2:17 a.m., even though I knew it had to be later. When I looked again, it said 4:02. The sky finally started to thin at the edges. Not sunrise exactly, just less black. The movement in the grass fell away and didn't come back. The road markers began to make sense again. The GPS arrival time started counting down normally. When daylight broke fully, I was crossing into eastern Colorado. The engine died a mile past the state line. No sputter, no warning. It just cut out like someone had turned a key. I coasted onto the shoulder and sat there shaking, hands still on the wheel, listening to the wind. The fuel gauge still read empty. The low fuel light was solid now, no flicker. I waited for something to move in the grass. Nothing did. A state trooper stopped less than 10 minutes later. He pulled in behind me, lights off. He asked for my license and asked what happened. I told him I ran out of gas. He looked at the gauge, then at me, like he wasn't sure I was telling the whole story. He gave me a ride to the nearest station and back with a can. When I poured the gas in and turned the key, the car started like nothing had ever been wrong. I drove the rest of the way in daylight. I didn't stop in Colorado. I didn't even slow down to look at the mountains. I turned around that afternoon and went home. A week later, after I'd slept and tried to convince myself it was stress, I pulled the dash cam footage. I'd installed it months earlier and forgotten about it. The video was clear. The road looked normal. Mile marker 114 appeared once. The broken reflector was there. The armadillo was there. The timestamp in the corner didn't line up. Segments of the drive overlapped. According to the footage, I passed the same marker at 12:41 a.m., 1:12 a.m., and 3:58 a.m. without the clock advancing normally between them. There were stretches where 10 minutes of driving covered over an hour of timestamps. There were gaps where the camera was recording, but the file skipped ahead without explanation. There was no movement in the grass on the video, no shape pacing the car, just empty roadside and wind-blown weeds. The fuel gauge on the dash cam overlay read empty for nearly 2 hours of footage while the car kept moving at highway speed. I saved the files to a hard drive and backed them up twice. I don't watch them anymore. I don't need to. I remember enough. I still drive, but I don't do overnight trips anymore. I don't cross Kansas after dark. I don't let the tank drop below half. And if I ever see the same mile marker twice, I don't keep going to see what happens the third time. I left Salt Lake City just before midnight, heading south toward Moab. The drive had always been easy in daylight, but at night the highway felt different. Wide stretches of desert, occasional rock formations, and the distant shimmer of headlights from the few cars that passed in either direction. I packed light, a small suitcase in the back seat, a cooler with water and snacks, my phone and charger, and a paper map folded on the passenger side. I didn't plan to rely on GPS. I liked the sense of knowing where I was without it. The sky was clear when I left, the stars bright above, though the moon hung low and pale, casting long shadows across the desert hills. The first couple of hours felt normal. The road was straight. The car hummed along at a steady speed. I had the radio low, classical music to keep me awake, to give me something to focus on besides the dark outside. At one point, I passed a rest area and thought about stopping, but I told myself I was fine. The desert at night can feel empty, but there is a rhythm to it, a stillness that is almost comforting if you let it be. I leaned back, hands firm on the wheel, eyes scanning the road. watching for the small changes that signal curves or dips. After a while, I noticed a car behind me. A dark sedan, older model, not unusual for these roads, but stayed behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was another late traveler. But then I realized it wasn't falling back when I slowed, and it wasn't passing when I sped up. It matched me exactly. The feeling I got wasn't fear yet, just a slow, tightening unease. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. Hours passed. The desert thinned, replaced by stretches of scrub and low mesas. The air grew cooler, and the headlights of the car behind me caught in the occasional roadside sign. It never got closer, never seemed to leave, but it never fell behind either. I felt a pressure in my chest, a constant awareness of its presence. Every few minutes, I checked the mirrors, my pulse quickening. I reached a small, almost forgotten gas station off the highway. One pump working, a single flickering light above it. I pulled in without signaling and parked as close to the building as I could. The sedan passed by without stopping. I waited 10 minutes, longer than I needed to, heart hammering. When I got back on the road, I merged into the small flow of traffic on the highway. The sedan wasn't visible. Relief swept through me. I stayed with the other vehicles for a while, letting the presence fade. Eventually, the traffic thinned and the sedan returned. Closer now, enough that I could see a vague silhouette behind a windshield. Not a face, just a shape. The awareness of being followed settled in fully then, heavy and unrelenting. The road narrowed. Curves came faster than expected, and there was no shoulder to pull over. The desert changed to low hills and rock outcroppings. I scanned every mile marker, every potential pullout, mentally noting where help could be found. I reached a ranger station off the main road. Seasonal, likely closed. The lot was empty, the building dim under the late afternoon sun. I pulled in quickly, parked near the door, and left the engine running. The sedan slowed at the entrance, but did not come in. It idled for a moment, then turned back onto the highway. I waited for several minutes, watching until it disappeared over a distant rise. I stayed at the station until sunset, then carefully drove to a busier highway that led toward Moab. The rest of the trip was uneventful. I stopped at gas stations where other cars were present, parked in well-lit lots, stayed alert the entire time. I slept poorly in a hotel that night, leaving the lights on and the door locked. The next day, I checked the car carefully. Nothing tampered with. No scratches, no damage, nothing to indicate anyone had been inside or near. I reported the incident to local authorities with all the details I could recall, but there was no follow-up, no sightings, no explanation. Looking back, I understand what saved me. The road was empty, isolated, and the sedan had no reason to leave. Once I moved into areas with other people, lit spaces, and places where intervention was possible, the risk disappeared. I learned to pay attention to patterns, to the subtle signs that something is out of place. It wasn't luck. It was awareness and careful decisions under pressure. The experience didn't change my desire to drive or explore, but it changed how I do it. I avoid long stretches of road alone at night, unless absolutely necessary. I check exits and potential safe spaces. I drive with someone else whenever I can, and I never underestimate the way isolation can amplify ordinary circumstances into real threats. That trip remains in my memory not as a story of violence or supernatural fear, but as a lesson in caution, awareness, and understanding the quiet, constant presence of something wrong. The sedan never followed anyone else I know. I never learned why it followed me. The experience ended because I forced a change in conditions. Once I made myself visible, unpredictable, and surrounded by potential witnesses, the situation resolved. I continue to drive long distances. I enjoy the road, the solitude, the landscapes, but I carry that memory with me, an invisible marker of how careful you must be when the world feels empty and the only thing you see is what follows you. Awareness and decisiveness are enough to keep you safe. That is the reality.